welcome tonight, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Anyone that is here with us tonight, I would really appreciate it if you guys could share in the chat where you're joining us from. Are you joining us from somewhere in the US, somewhere internationally? Love to know where you're joining us from, and then also what you do in education. And if you're not in education, you could be a parent, community member. Share those with us in the comments and chats. My name is Elena Clark. I'm the COO at Teacher Goals. And tonight, we are here to celebrate the launch of our new book, Relational Intelligence. And a little bit, I'm going to be bringing our two co-authors up to talk a little bit about leadership tonight, talk a little bit about relationships tonight, how to build those relationships. And I think this is a really great thing to talk about because, you know, whether we want to talk about it or not, we're in back to school season. So let's get excited about that. So I am going to, let's see if we got some people talking right now. Let me check our comments real quick. Here we go. We got some coming in. Okay. Check these. And I am going to, one second, please. Sorry, guys. Little tech thing. Just hold on with me 1 second. Okay. I am going to go ahead now and bring our two authors up to join us. So here we bring our authors. We have Dr. Brad Johnson and Dr. Rachel Edo Eckett. And so I really thank you so much for bringing and joining us here tonight. We are here to celebrate your guys' new book. So exciting. Launch today.
Yes.
And so kind of what I want to get started tonight, if you guys both can just introduce yourselves a little bit to the audience, kind of introduce your guys' background a little bit, your experience, so they know kind of what they can learn from you guys.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Edo Eckett. I currently serve as a school principal in Maryland. Before I was a school principal, I was a kindergarten teacher. So that's actually how I started my career, was working with the youngest learners. And I've really had an amazing time being a school leader. And I try to use some of the skills that I was as a teacher in my role. And so I'm just very excited to release this book. I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity for us to continue to learn and share ideas together as school leaders so that we can continue to have great schools and continue to serve students in the best way possible.
Awesome. And Brad?
Yeah. So I'm Brad Johnson. If you don't follow me, you should. I was an administrator, a teacher. I've done it all for almost 30 years. And so for the last several years, I've just been an author and a speaker. I've traveled literally all around the world. And my big thing is always relationships, whether it's the teacher and the student or the administrator and teacher or administrators with other administrators. It's the foundation of.
Oh no. Did we lose some, Rachel?
Education and really.
There he is. Hold on. Brad, you're breaking up a little bit, I think.
Okay, I think I'm back now.
There we go. You're back. You're back.
And so I just wanted to write this book on relational intelligence. I met Rachel a couple of years ago. We were doing a conference together and really felt the connection and kind of the same focus on the importance of building relationships and the importance of it as an administrator. We have to know the people we lead to be able to lead them. And I think that's where a lot of times the disconnect comes in. People rise to the level of leaders based on their past performance, their past competencies. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have great leadership skills. And so we know the research says that basically relational intelligence is the #1 factor for success as a leader. And so hopefully we've been able to draw out a blueprint for administrators to be able to develop that relational intelligence so that they will be much more successful.
Yes, awesome. I think that's what's really awesome about this book is obviously it's focused on relationships. I think we all really kind of know that deep down that relationships are so important in everything we do, but sometimes we forget that a little bit. So so you guys now have introduced yourselves a little bit. Now I kind of really want to dive into, touched on a tiny bit, but why this book and why now? Why do you think leaders, educators need this book, and why now? Rachel, would you like to start?
Sure. This book is really important because I think it fills a very important gap. Right now, as school leaders and anyone in education, we know there's a lot of things that are out of our control. We're not in control of the budgets right now. We're not in control of position cuts and a lot of things that we are dealing with. But what we can control is how we treat each other, how we respond to situations. And what is really lovely about this book is that despite all the things that are out of our control right now in education, what we really want to focus on is how do we retain and keep the best teachers in our buildings? How do we recruit people in a way that they want to work with us and for us and serving our larger communities? We know when teachers leave, it's very disruptive to the community. And test scores can be tied to that because when you have a stable group of teachers, you have a stable school. You have a well-functioning place where people trust the teachers there, they trust the staff, they trust the administrators, and they want to be there. That stability matters. And one of the ways that we can help control some of that stability is how we relate to people, how we make people's jobs easier, or how we have empathy when there are times when there are roles that are hard. How do we respond as administrators in a way that's empathetic? How do we have relationships with people so that even when things are hard, they know that we're here to support and have their backs? So that's really what this book is about. It's really foundational to our work because we know when we have stable communities with great teachers, great staff, and great students, then we have great schools. And all of us want to lead great schools.
And Brad, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we didn't call it like relationships or something, but we did call it relational intelligence, is because it's not just about warm and fuzzy. A lot of times when people hear, or when I'm speaking or even posting something on relationships, everybody's like, oh, well, you got to be more than their friend. And I'm like, you do not understand what relational intelligence is, because developing those relationships, just like any relationship, even personal ones, it's hard work. It takes a lot of work. It's not always easy. Conversations are not always easy. And so what we've done in this book is kind of map out how to even handle those struggles, the good and the bad relationships. Yeah, you want to be the kind, the empathetic, the caring, which is very important. And that's another reason we wrote the book that Rachel alluded to, is because teaching is what we call a high agreeableness profession. And that means most of the people that are in that field are very kind, caring, empathetic. They're very other focused. They're very affirmational in their speech to other people, to their students. And so because they speak that language, they need that language spoken to them as well. And so it's important for administrators and leaders to understand that they have to approach it that way. That when they are dealing with their staff, they have to be affirmational. They need to be motivational. One of the things that I always say is morale reflects leadership. And yes, you choose to be there, but because they're high agreeable, because of the type of personality they have, leaders have to make that transformation or that transition to be more relational focused. And when you do that, then, as Rachel said, you build a culture where people want to be. And when we have consistency in our schools and our classrooms, that's one of the pieces that's missing so often. It's like having a sports team. If you have high turnover, then you never really have that team culture. You don't have that chemistry that we are always looking for. And that's the same in schools. When you have leaders that have staff that are there year after year after year, and they develop that consistency, and that chemistry, they build a powerful school culture.
Yeah, that's true. It's amazing how important relationships are. I remember, I just also sometimes think as you were talking a little bit about turnover, and and stability a little bit. And everyone thrives when they feel stable and stability. Children, adults, all of us do. So when you have those relationships as a leader and you retain those teachers, that causes just stability naturally in your school, in your classroom, and then trickle down to the students. Right. Yeah. So I saw, and I've read a little bit in your book that you guys talk a little bit about relational power versus kind of authority. Can you kind of talk on that a little bit and explain that a little bit more?
Brad, you can start.
Yeah. So, I always say if you have to use your position to win the argument or the conversation, you've kind of already lost, because it's really not about authority. It's kind of the same way in the classroom. That's why we talk about the importance of developing those relationships with the students, is because, it's not, I always say, and you don't want to say it too often, but, in reality, if you walk in any school, the students could run the school if they really wanted to, because there's 1,000 of them and 50 adults or whatever. So realistically, that's the reality. But so it can't be about just authority. It's got to be about building those relationships and getting the best out of them. And as adults, we're the same as students in the sense that we like to be recognized for a job well done. And when we have someone that notices what we do well, we want to work harder for them. We like to, and again, being that high agreeable person that most teachers are, we are people pleasers. And so when you develop that relationship with them, that's where you get the most from them, not the demanding, the authoritative. That's usually when you get the least from them, or you at the very least get almost a passive aggressive type of interaction with them, which is not building or healthy for your school culture.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know for me as a new leader, when I was a new assistant principal, I was coming out of the kindergarten classroom, and I really, really wanted the respect of everyone. I wanted people to see me as competent. I wanted people to see me as perfect. And I knew that I had that power, right? I had that power as an assistant principal to give an orders, quote unquote, and that people would have to comply with that. But we really need to move beyond compliance. We need to move to that connection piece. We want people to be inspired by the work. We want to be collaborative in the work. It's not enough, like you said, to have positional power and just be all over. That's not the way of this work, and that's not a productive way to lead. And so what we want people to do as they're reading the book is to really examine ourselves, being reflective and thinking about areas where, if there are some areas where we want to build more trust, then we have multiple chapters on building trust. If there are ones that we need support with communication, we have lots of great ideas in the book around how to increase communication and how to connect with people. So I think that whether you are a veteran administrator, a new administrator, an aspiring leader, you're going to find a lot of value in this book. We have very practical things that are free to do or very low cost that will help morale and help us become stronger leaders.
Yeah.
And it's like I said earlier, and the research is very clear that relational intelligence, they call it RQ, like IQ and EQ, but that RQ, that relational intelligence that we focus on, that is the key indicator. That's the most important factor for success as a leader. Again, because it goes back to, people are promoted because they did well. You were a good teacher, you were a good team leader, you were ready to move up to an assistant principal and a principal or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you have that skill set to really relate to people and get the most out of people. And that's what leadership is really all about. It's not about what you're accomplishing, because see, a lot of times that's the mindset when we talk about the control that Rachel just talked about. So the mindset is, well, I was successful, so that's how I'm going to be as a leader. I'm going to demand this. And even if it's not demanding it, you feel like you're responsible for everything that's done. And in a sense, that's true. But the reality is it's not about what you do, it's about what you get everyone else to do. And that's what good leaders do. They get the best out of others. They don't, and that's one of the reasons a lot of leaders struggle, is because they're still coming from the mindset of, what did I do? And I was successful, and me. And that's not leadership. The leadership is the other focus now. It's on getting the best out of them. What can I do to help them be successful?
Yeah, that's great. I love that. One thing, and in the book, you guys both touch on this a little bit, but I always love hearing like personal, stories that were you like. Can you guys each share maybe an example of a success story of like an actual one-on-one experience you had with an educator teacher where you used relational intelligence and how that was able to turn around something for you or connect with that person? Brad, would you like to start?
Yeah, when I speak, especially to leaders, but a lot of times share it even when I speak with teachers. But as a administrator, having a teacher that would leave, especially the first weeks of school, and with school coming up, and hopefully some of leaders that may be listening right now will get something from this story. But I had a young teacher every day with her, the little red flyer wagon, the full size, and it would be loaded down with all of her workbooks and curriculum and all that stuff. And so every day I would see her going across the parking lot with that, pulling that 100-pound wagon. It weighed more than she did. And so after about the second or third day, I watched, and I went out there and I asked her to stop for a minute. And I went out there and I said, I see you taking this home every night. And I said, school's just started. And I said, let me borrow this for a minute. I said, I'm going to take this back to your classroom, and it's going to be there in the morning. And I said, and the world's not going to end. You're not going to be fired. I said, go home and take care of yourself. And, one of the things I joke with the crowds when I say that is, you're not going to be fired. And it's almost impossible to get fired anymore because there's such a teacher shortage.
Yeah.
That's very hard to do now. That isn't, asking them to try to get fired. But anyway, it's just so important for them to be aware. If you're in the hallways, when you're with in the classrooms, you have to be present and get the feel. We always talk about like teachers standing at the door and greeting their students. It's not just about the high five and talking to them. It's about seeing how they come in. How are they feeling that day? Can you see something? Do they seem off? When you build those relationships, you can tell when someone's having a bad morning or something's going on. Well, leaders should be able to do the same thing. When they see a teacher come in and tell that they're burned out or something's going on, and take that time to say, hey, go home, leave everything here, and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me,
Rachel.
I'm someone who transferred to a new school this past year, having been in another school community as a leader for 9 years. And so I have lots of examples to share, but again, someone who's coming as experience as a principal, but when you transfer to a new school, it's almost as if you're a new principal all over again, because it is the people that matter. You might know the job, but you don't know the people yet. And so one of the lessons that I learned this year was just slowing down and taking that opportunity to walk the building, and not with a purpose, like to walk the building, to say hello, to talk with people. Sometimes when, we have quick conversations, hi, how are you? Fine. And then you keep going. No, that's not enough. So what I've learned to do really is to slow down and to say, no, really, how are you? And when you ask sometimes the second, how are you, you get a more real response. I'm tired. I'm a little exhausted. I'm managing something at home, or something is challenging me at work. And then that gives that opportunity to really continue to build a relationship. So for me, one thing I had to learn to do was to slow down and to take the time person by person to get to know them. And it's still a process, because again, I'm in my second year now, heading into the next school year. But I know that I'm making inroads, that I'm building those relationships that are needed in order to continue to move our school forward. So I'm someone who always has a phone. I always have something to do, but I've learned to push it to the side and really focus one-on-one with a person without distractions. That's been a big source of learning for me, and a reminder to keep doing that. And this book helps remind us the importance of doing that and placing people front and center.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brad.
I absolutely agree with that. And because one of the things I hope that we bring out in the book, or that you take away from it, and Rachel just hit it perfectly, you can burn yourself out. You can never get everything accomplished as an administrator. There's just not enough hours in the day. So you could just run from meeting to event to the district office to whatever. You can spend all day, every day putting out fires because they're everywhere. But you have to be diligent in focusing on taking care of the things. You know, I believe if you take 3 or 4 goals for the week and make them your must-dos and make sure you accomplish those, that's what helps build the vision, helps carry out the mission statement. Like I said, there's always a million things to do and 1,000 fires to put out. So you have to prioritize. And that's one of the things we talk about in the book, is you have to learn how to prioritize. And part of that really is, and it seems kind of the opposite, but taking that time for those small conversations. But one of the main crux or legs that we talk about, or pillars that we talk about in the book, is trust capital. And the research is clear. You build trust with your staff through those small conversations. How are you doing? How's your family? You know, how's your children? Those types of things. When they see that you value them as a person first, then they understand that you value them as a professional too. And that's how you build that trust capital. They're like, you know, they really do care about me. They know my name. They know what's going on in my life. And that builds that trust with them to do the things that they ask you to do. And that's so important, you know, for the teachers, for the students, for the administrator, and building that school culture.
Yeah. And I have another question I want to touch on that I just thought of, but I wanted to share a few comments out loud that are coming in, because I was just looking, and it says we have 450 people watching right now. And so I also wanted to mention to everyone that is listening and tuning in that if you have any questions for Rachel or Brad, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll either answer some at the end, or I'll pop them in while we're talking. So share any questions you have. But I just wanted to share a few comments here. Got congratulations to both of you. You're aspiring leaders and educators. Very happy your book is out in the world. Say thank you, Lauren. We got right here, says the heart of the leader becomes the heart of their people. Great example, Dr. Johnson. Say thank you. We got great comments. We got this. She really loved the second. How are you really? Like really diving deeper into that. We've got Brad from Teacher Goals chiming in, taking time to build relationships is so important. Another administrator. So we have some really awesome comments in. So if you guys have any questions while I move into my next question, pop them into the comments and I will definitely share them. But another thing I want to touch on is that, Brad, you kind of started on it a little bit, but really talking about building that trust capital. And the book really dives into trust and building that trust. And you talked a little bit about how, you know, just those short conversations, connections can really help that. But can you guys give maybe some other examples, maybe even some I always love to have these lives and share some things that what are something that someone can do tomorrow, as a leader in their school to help build trust?
I'm sorry. Yeah, well, and the thing about trust capital, and I'll explain it a little bit and they can read it in the book because it's really important to understand, but it is literally like capital, like money. And when you take that time for those conversations and you build that trust with them, you're making deposits. You're making deposits into that account. And so what happens then, at some point, you may have to make a decision that you have to make alone. You may have to make a decision that nobody really likes, But if you built that trust capital with them, then when you go to withdraw, there's that money in there, so to speak, to draw out. You have that trust built to where they're like, you know what? I don't necessarily agree with this, but I trust them that they're doing the right thing. And that is so important, because if you don't build that, if they don't feel like you trust them, that, you know, you never ask for input, and you talk about asking for input, asking for feedback. It doesn't mean that you use every bit of that everybody shares with you, either in input or feedback. But if you're not listening to the people you lead at all, then they're going to say, hey, they don't trust me, they don't value me, they don't, you know, value my expertise. So why should I trust them? And so all of that comes together with that trust capital. And like I said, if you haven't deposited into that, when you go to withdraw, there's nothing there. And so, you know, it's like having that bank account that's on zero. You're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. And I know for me, leaders, you know, it's very hard to be an educator right now. It's actually always been hard to be an educator in terms of what teachers have to balance and competing needs between things at school and home. It's a tough position to be in. And so I know for me as an administrator, I try to be really impeccable with my word. And it's something as simple as if someone sends me an email that is, I know that's important to them, but that, you know, we have hundreds of emails as administrators. Sometimes it's simply acknowledging, I see this email, I am going to respond to you, give me 24 hours, give me a little bit of time to think about it, but I will come back. And then having that touch point with the person to say, oh, I did see the email, I'm just letting you know, right? So those are small things that we can do to let people know that it's important, that we value them and whatever the issues are, that we're here to support. It's that responsiveness, because as leaders, people are always listening. They're not just listening to what we say, but they're watching what we do. So it's not just enough to say things. We have to really follow through with what we're saying. Another way that we can show trust with our teachers, sometimes there are different family or community issues that come up, and a teacher might feel uncomfortable or nervous about things. So as administrators, we can have their backs. We can ask them their opinion about things. We can follow up. We can be present in meetings with our teachers. There are many things that we can do that don't cost anything, but that mean a lot. I remember when I was a new teacher, having to sit in an uncomfortable meeting, and my principal was right there with me. And just having her there was a reassurance that I needed to continue with confidence through that meeting. Those are things that we can do to show that we care and respect the people that we're serving. They don't cost anything, but they mean a lot in the long run.
Yeah, I feel like that's so true when you have a, you know, an educator, a teacher that's really happy where they are. I feel like the thing you hear a lot of times is they feel like their leader, their school leader has their back, you know, and when they feel that way, that's what, and I know I think I talked to you about this before, Rachel, when we had our meeting earlier this week about it's been true in my life, and I'm sure it's true in other people's lives, that people quit bosses, not jobs. And 100% has been like, I think about just my career and my experiences. It wasn't the job I didn't like or love. It was my boss or the community that boss, that, you know, that leader had built at that place. And it made me want to stay, maybe want to be welcome there. I wanted to come so much because of the leaders and the community or team they built. Okay, well, awesome. I just had a question pop up, so that's perfect timing. So let me share that. We have got Shannon here is asking, what can a teacher do to help build these relationships to make it easier?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like communication. It's not a one-way street. Mm-hmm. I like to tell teachers, if you've got an administrator that has your back, that do those, you need to let them know. Because oftentimes as teachers, we don't really go to the administrator unless we have a problem or an issue. And I understand that some administrators like, well, I don't need, you know, their encouragement, or I don't need whatever, but we really do. You know, that's kind of like maybe not arrogant, but I'm like, you know, it doesn't matter how good you are and how well you do your job. for the people that you lead to let you know that they appreciate you is important. And if you don't think that's important, then there's something that you're missing there that you really probably need to figure out. But it is so important for teachers to do that too. I always like to use the example of geese flying. The leader's in the front, and the rest of the geese are not only honking to encourage each other, but they're honking to encourage that leader in the front. And so it's just important for the staff. And, you know, one of the things I joke about is when I go through a hallway, I should hear y'all honking every morning, because y'all should be encouraging each other. You should be encouraging your leaders. It should be everybody. That's how you build that type of culture. You know, it's just like, you know, I always use the example of, if you ever seen, even at the college level or pro level, a girls softball team is so amazing, because they're always cheering each other. You know, guys do a little bit, and if they do something good, but man, they're like cheerleaders on the field, in the dugout. Like, they are so supportive of each other, and it creates that powerful environment that we want to be in, that we want to be a part of. So yeah, teachers encourage each other. You know, one of the things I talk about with principals doing is post-its of praise. You know, visit, you know, Rachel talked about, she visits classrooms, not with an agenda, but just to spend time and to see them, and in the hallways. And when you do, leave them a note. Man, teachers love those notes as much from an administrator as they do from their students.
Yeah.
But you know what? Teachers love notes from other teachers too. Hey, I heard this from a student that you did today, or I saw you trying this. And just encouraging each other and your leaders. You know, I know you had to make this tough decision, but, you know, we appreciate all you do for us. Those things make, you know, we always talk about those small moments build to huge momentum. And that's how that you can help build that culture.
Yeah. And I love that. I also, when I'm doing observations, one thing that I will do is, before I leave, I will ask a couple students, what do you love most about your teacher? And then I will write that note and just leave that there, and just let the teacher know I'm excited to follow up with them. But that's always nice to ask students what they love. But Shannon, I like this question, because I agree with Brad. As administrators, we want feedback too. And I know for me, being new to my school, what I've really appreciated that our staff has done, first of all, they are very welcoming to me. That's number one. I love that they gave me an opportunity to lead and to learn alongside, but also they gave me important feedback on how I can continue to grow and get better. But the most important thing that the staff did was, every now and then they would ask me, how are you feeling? It's the same type of reciprocal, no, really, how are you? That was tough. That was a tough conversation we just had. How are you feeling? And that gives me a chance to say, okay, let me tell you how I really feel about it, right? So even then, we're building relationships with people, and they're getting to see that as administrators, we are not robots. We are humans just like everyone else. We are not perfect. We don't have all the answers. Yes, we have resources, we have skill sets, but ultimately we have feelings just like everyone else. So if a teacher comes to me and says, how are you? That means the world to me. The same way that if I go to a teacher and ask them as principal, how's your day going? How's your family? How's your pet? It does make a difference. So I think, Shannon, just being welcoming and also having that openness and trying to build that rapport with your principal or assistant principal team would be amazing.
Yeah, I love that.
And, you know, to piggyback a little bit on what Rachel just said, because it just went off like a light for me, and we talk about in the book, is you don't have to be perfect as a leader. We feel like we have to, and there's so much pressure put on administrators sometimes. For grades, for data, for scores, for this and that. But your staff doesn't really expect you to be perfect. And so you don't need to put that pressure on yourself. All you have to do is be present. Just bring your best every day, be present, and model. Rachel talked about earlier, modeling what you want to see duplicated, but part of that is taking care of yourself. The research talks about that about 55% of principals feel like they're depressed. and many of them are, contemplating leaving the field. And, whether it's a principal or a district level, man, the turnover rate is even higher than it is for teachers.
Yeah.
The average, I call it life expectancy, but work expectancy for a principal is on average about 3 years. And so if you have one that's there longer than that, that's good, but that's just not the reality. So there is a lot of pressure on them. And so they do feel like they have to do it all. But I'm telling you, that is not how you're going to be successful. That's just how you're going to burn out and, to fizzle out. So don't be perfect, be present, take care of yourself, and just, understand that it's more important for you to build up your team, to build that trust, make those connections with them, and let them help you with the heavy lifting. Because it's a team effort. It's not you on an island by yourself. If that's how you feel, or if you're struggling with those connections, or you're have a hard time communicating, even like to share with principals, you may not be great at doing appreciative type things, or maybe doing Post-it notes or whatever.
Yeah.
But the number one thing you can do is let your staff know that. Hey, I'm not the best at this, but I want to do better.
Yeah.
That right there changes your whole culture immediately, because that authenticity with them, being vulnerable with them, allows them to see, hey, you know what? Yeah, you probably haven't been the best, but you're reflecting on it. You're wanting to do better. And that makes a huge difference.
It does. Every time I've been vulnerable with staff, it has been a different breakthrough. But the times when I've tried to hold it all together as best as I can is the time when I've connected the least. So when people see even just little cracks, sometimes if we expose just a little bit and saying, I might look a certain way, but here's how I'm feeling, I'm holding it together. Then you will hear 5 other people saying, I'm holding it together too. Right. So then you have another point of connection with everybody. That's an important one.
Yeah. I think it's important. You again, you guys are kind of touching into my next question, but I do think and actually I had a question come in, so I'm going to go to that one, but I do think as leaders, it can be a lonely job, right? It can be, sometimes because you have to make those tough decisions, it can be lonely. And I also think what you mentioned too about with leaders, I think leaders that are authentic, Brad, like you mentioned, like admit that this isn't your strong suit, ask for help. I think sometimes leaders don't want to do that, especially at first, maybe at a new school, because I'm supposed to know it all. I'm supposed to I was just hired out of all the candidates for this job. I should know all of your questions and I should be perfect at this, and this, but that's just not realistic.
And what is, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go.
No, what is so funny about that is, again, I've made that error while thinking, and it's very counterintuitive because you assume, okay, I need to know everything. But here's the trick. If you walk into your building and you are expressing that you know everything and that you have all the answers, there are going to be some traps that you're going to walk right into. That's just human nature. So it's much better to come in with a humble heart and humility to say, I have great skills, but I have a lot to learn. You never want to walk into a situation acting like you know it all, because you will quickly learn you do not. And it is a humbling experience, to say the least.
Exactly. Okay, well, we've got a question that came in, a couple, so let me share this. We have got, how do you build your own relational trust as leaders to be able to cultivate this with others? From Sonia. So you want to start with that?
So personally, I think for me, it really starts from knowing myself as a leader, my beliefs, and just leading authentically. I think sometimes where we have trouble with trust, sometimes even within ourselves, is if we're presenting one way and then presenting another way behind closed doors. So I know for me, I try to be as consistent as possible. Consistency is really the foundational building blocks of trust. If you're not a consistent person, with other people, then you are not going to be able to build trust. Trust is one of those things where people have expectations that if you say one thing, that you mean that you're going to do that. So consistency is really important personally to yourself and also to other people. So I think one of the first things is being a consistent person, being a reliable person, being responsible, following through on what you say you're going to do. That's how you build trust with yourself and with other people as well. Because I think when people know that your word is impeccable, that's not to say you're perfect, but it does mean if you make a mistake, you're going to admit that you did something wrong. You know, this is one of those jobs where we say sorry a lot. Sometimes I've apologized for things that I had absolutely nothing to do with, but it needed to happen so that we could all move forward. And this is sometimes a part of the job. Sometimes we have to take responsibility for things that we may or may not have had a hand in. But it is important that we're able to admit sometimes when things don't work out, because then we can model that trust with other people. So then in the future, you have a teacher say, I did make this mistake. I want to be upfront about it. Mm-hmm. And then let's move forward. Well, typically you're not at that point unless a leader has modeled that for you, or that's a culture in a building, because sometimes as humans, we just like to blame. So I think as leaders, the way we cultivate that is modeling trust with other people, being transparent about our thoughts, our thinking process, our strategies. And if something doesn't work out, being transparent about why it didn't work out and what we can do in the future to shift it to make it better.
It took me a second. I think Rachel got it right. I didn't fully understand it, but I think what Rachel shared is what she was asking, like believing in yourself or trusting yourself first before you can build that with others. And I would say to especially new leaders, and Rachel can probably reflect on this from last year, highly agreeable people tend to have imposter syndrome. And so you never feel like you're good enough or know enough, or there's someone that knows more that should be doing it or whatever. And so you have to get past that first. I always say teachers and educators are their own worst critic. We beat ourselves up over things that nobody else thinks twice about. But if you're new to a role, you should have some type of imposter syndrome a little bit. If not, I say you're narcissistic. So it's common, and it's actually okay to have that because you're not expected to know everything. Now, I know in education, unfortunately, that isn't the case. You tend to have others expect you to know everything, whether you're a new teacher in the classroom or a new administrator. But the reality is that we don't. And so you have to learn to cut yourself. You know, I always talk about grace and patience. That goes for yourself as well. You have to learn how to give yourself grace. And the other thing too, again, it goes back to that with like the imposter syndrome is again, realizing you don't need to be perfect and nobody really expects you to, but also how to grow with that, like how to set boundaries, how to learn to believe in yourself, to trust yourself. And I always talk about the importance of self-talk, because if you're not building yourself up, nobody else is going to. And so I think that's part of it as well. But I think that was a really good question. And it really does. If you aren't, if you don't believe in yourself and trust yourself first, then it's hard to get other people to as well.
Yeah. It's building that confidence. And I think confidence is built by taking risks, doing some new things, and then analyzing what worked, what didn't work, and then trying something else again. And then once you secure little wins, and this is a job where the wins sometimes are quiet and the criticism is loud. So we have to ourselves encourage ourselves by saying, wow, that went well, whether or not someone acknowledges it or not. I know for me, I do that a lot throughout the day. Like, oh, that was a really good conversation. Or I connected with a parent that I really needed to have a conversation with. That's a win. No one's going to be coming to my door to give me flowers for that, but I still acknowledge that, oh, I was nervous about this meeting and it went a little bit better than I thought it would. That's a win, right? Yeah. So we have to build confidence. Then the next time we're faced with, okay, here comes another challenging conversation, we can go back in our bank and say, wait, I have done this before. Here's what worked. Let's try it again. So that's how we continue to build confidence in ourselves as leaders. And that confidence really does reverberate through our building. If we are confident as leaders, and other people will look at us and begin to have that trust with us as well. Like, oh, this person is a competent leader. I can follow them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what I really like that you touched on earlier after this question was how the power of an apology, the power of saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes from a leader.
Yeah.
Like, it is amazing how acknowledging that is to, even like you said, even there's been times where you've had to apologize for things that you might not even have any involvement in.
Yeah.
But that person needed to be acknowledged to be able to move forward.
Yes.
For the classroom, for your building, or whatever it is, and how important that is. And again, it makes you seem human as well, right?
Yeah. It's a great connector. I definitely had to apologize several times this year. And honestly, after each of the conversations, we were closer as a result of it. It was an important step. Yes.
And
we all make mistakes.
And it's not easy I don't think it's easy for anyone to say they're sorry. Like you said, Brad, too, like everyone naturally wants to, it's just naturally in us as humans, to want to be right, to not do anything wrong. So actually acknowledging and really saying sorry is so powerful, especially as leaders. Okay, well, let me see if we have any more questions in here tonight. But I think we do. I don't think we have any right now. But if you have any more questions, drop them in. I kind of wanted to end a little bit of tonight, kind of having you both talk on what out of everything tonight would you want everyone to get out of what they will get from this book, and kind of what your hopes are for leaders moving into this school year. And Brad, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, my thing is that education is relationship centered. Everything evolves from that. The student-teacher relationship, teacher is the most important thing in the classroom for student success, more than technology, curriculum, etc. And so it's the same thing with leaders. Teachers can have the best curriculum, the best technology, but if they've got a leader that believes in them, that values them. In fact, one of the things we talk about in here is that it's called the 6X factor. Gallup did a poll, and what they found is that when people feel like that they're valued in their role and their strengths are utilized, and we really didn't get a chance to talk about that tonight, but the importance of utilizing the strengths of your staff. But when you do that, the research says they are 6 times more engaged. And you think about, as leaders out there listening right now, think about your staff. Think about if they were 6 times more engaged, what would that classroom look like? What would those lessons look like? What would that environment be like? Because remember, the teacher's working environment is your student's learning environment. So if they feel valued and their strengths are utilized and they're 6 times more engaged in what they do, they're going to create a dynamic learning culture for your students. And that is at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Rachel, because I did see a question pop in, so I'm gonna let us ask that too, but I'm gonna let you go ahead.
So we are going back to school. Our district is starting in almost exactly 1 month. 1 month from tomorrow, we will be in the first day of school. So I have a lot of hope for the school year. I definitely am so excited to see our students again and to reconnect with our staff in a couple of weeks. I think what I would love people, first of all, to pick up a copy of this book. I think it is a game changer in terms of ways that we can become stronger as leaders, that our schools can become better. We know that when we as leaders become better, everyone around us becomes better. And what I love about this book is it's not just for new leaders or novice leaders. This is for everyone, no matter what stage of your leadership you're in. Because as I learned, you might be seasoned in one school and then the next one you're new again. So this is a book that can really benefit. One of the things that we didn't touch as much on is the communication piece. And strong communication skills are so important. We talk about the difference between that transactional communication and the communication for connection, and what are some of the differences. So I think if you want some communication strategies then this is the book for you. We spend a lot of time talking about how to become stronger communicators, not just with our staff, but also within our communities. This is a high pressure job. We know that, but there are so many joys and wonderful things that go along with this job. So I think this book is just an excellent companion to help us all continue to develop as great leaders.
Yeah. And we did have, like I said, another question come in. So I'd love to share it with you guys before we've got, what strategies from the book on your personal experiences are most effective for resolving conflicts?
Yeah, we actually have a whole section on that because it's so important. And, you know, we
Excuse me.
I won't go through the whole thing, the step by step, but we lay it out because, you know, several years ago, I interviewed like 30 of some of the top executives and CEOs from around the world in business, in sport, in military. And what I found during the interviews was that there was a connection when it come to conflict. And it wasn't that they enjoyed it or they liked it, but they learned to be good at it. And so a lot of times with high agreeable people, which teachers tend to be, but administrators tend to be because we move up from teachers into administration, is that we don't like conflict. And we see it as a 4-letter word, it's a bad word. And so we're not very good at it. But the reality is if you learn how to do conflict effectively, and so we lay it out step by step, remove the emotions. It's not easy to do, but that is probably 90% of the problem with conflict is the emotions. Yeah. And so it's learning how to focus on the issue, not the emotions. It's learning how to, and it goes back to the communication part that Rachel just talked about. See, often we talk about listening to respond or whatever, and it's even deeper than that. And it's even deeper than learning or listening to understand. It's about listening to connect. And when you listen to connect, you actually are empathizing with the person and kind of putting yourself in their shoes. So when you have conflict with someone, it's not just about listening to them or hearing them. It's about really understanding where they're coming from. And when you remove the emotion from it and really focus on what is the issue, how can we resolve the issue? And you take time to work through that. You know, and again, we don't have time to go through it all, but, you know, it's about taking a step back to calm yourself down before you engage with the person instead of flying right in. You know, I'm like, as human beings, we typically handle conflict in the worst possible way because we engage in it at the worst possible time. We engage in it when we've had it up to here. Yeah. When we are emotionally charged is when we engage in it. And that is the worst possible time. So it is something that we have to learn. And again, we lay out the steps, but it is a process that you learn just like anything else. And so learning how to handle it properly, how to go through those steps is so key to handling conflict. And the other part to that too is that conflict is not a negative thing and it's not necessarily a good thing. It's how we deal with it. But if we deal with it properly, it will always have a positive effect, whether it actually builds the relationship stronger, it resolves a problem, whatever that it is, there's so many opportunities for it to have a positive outcome when it's done correctly.
Yeah. And I was going to add, Brad, in the book, we have a lot of different scenarios around managing conflict and using our communication skills to do so. One of the things that we point out is oftentimes it's not so much that you're talking about polar opposites, like you're on this side and I'm on this side, but it really is about values. And so when you're looking, most of the time people are upset about something, it's because their core values are so deeply ingrained. And sometimes they brush up against each other. So really, we talk about in the book, figuring out what are those core values, and then how can we communicate those values in a way that is productive, as Brad said, that can bring us to a different outcome. I know when I'm trying to manage conflict amongst two people, sometimes on the same team or sometimes on different teams, sometimes it does take a level of mediation, but really the first step is figuring out what are the values, what's brushing up against each other, and are there any compromises that we can make, or what are the strengths that we can bring out of both of those values so that we can build something new. So there are many examples in the book like that, and you'll see how in one of the examples, We took two teammates that were having a conflict over some curriculum and how they were able to come together to take parts of the curriculum to really build it to meet their students' needs. And ultimately, that's what we're here to do, to meet the students' needs. So this is a great question, and we definitely address this in the book.
Yeah, I love that. I love that question too, about and how you guys kind of touched a little bit how on dealing with conflict is it's kind of like a practice. It's a skill that you have to work on. And I know you guys talk about this a little bit in a book, but a lot of times learning how to deal with conflict can just also be knowing like when is the right time to approach the conflict. Like you said, like sometimes as humans, we automatically want to like, we're going to start that conflict when we've had it up to here with that person or right after they did something, when if you just take a step back, take time to settle, like all those things. But we actually have to almost like train our bodies to react that way, because it actually doesn't come instinctually for us to settle down first and then address the conflict when our brains and our minds are a little bit clearer. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that was our last question that I saw come in so far. But one thing I want to mention to everyone at the audience, and I'm so excited, it now says we have 780 people watching right now. So I'm so excited that we had so many people join us tonight. Right now in the chat, I am dropping a link for everyone, which will be the preview of the first chapter for you all to check out. So this should come up in the comments in a section. Let's let StreamYard think about it for a little bit. I'm trying to send it. Oh, okay. It should have gone out to some of them. If it doesn't, I'm going to add it into the event stuff. But let me try one more time. And then I'm also going to be dropping the link to the book. I really hope all of you guys that are watching tonight that you will check out this book, download the ebook, grab yourself a paperback copy. Make sure to connect and follow Rachel and Brad on social media. Rachel, where's really usually the best place to connect with you? What's social media?
I would say Instagram. I'm at The Principal's Journey, but my regular name, Rachel Edowekit, is Twitter and also LinkedIn. So you can find me there too.
Awesome. And what about you, Brad?
Yeah, just Dr. Brad Johnson everywhere.
Yeah.
You were smart. You thought about that.
Yes, you got it everywhere. Well, sometimes it's just a matter of like trying to claim your name on every channel.
Yes.
Sometimes someone else already has.
Because I'm old.
No, that's not true. Okay, well, I'm going to share the book link again. We shared it in the chat. I want to thank everyone for joining us here tonight. This was such a great conversation with back to school season happening. And I hope everyone has a great night and grab the book. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye, guys.